Welcome back. If you watched that last video, then you already know the model that we're talking about that exists behind every high impact organization. And it's not what most people think. So the real question becomes, where do you fit into all of this? Because for most people, the assumption is we don't have the funding, which most of you don't. We don't have the resources, which most of you don't. We're just trying to make it work. But what if I told you that that was only about a third of your problem? That was not the main problem, right? So let's take a look at what I mean by that. Most organizations believe that it is simply because of their underfunding that they're not able to move forward and pursue government grants and contracts. That's the language, that's the narrative, that's the story that you tell yourself. And that actually is masking the real issue. Because when you say that we're underfunded, what you're really saying is we don't see where the money is supposed to come from. Akia, how are we actually supposed to make bigger impact with our food pantry, with our housing services, with our community-based initiatives when we can't really identify how we're going to be able to take care of more people? And that, while yes, there's a funding problem, the bigger issue to your funding is really visibility and positioning. So let me just pause for a moment, because as a business coach, as a consultant, when I work with organizations, I'm the money chick, right? Like I can find all paths and all access points to money. And so when you think about government grants and contracts and corporate contracts, most people are like, well, I don't know where to look. And once I know where to look, I don't know how to apply. And once I apply, how do I really get their attention? So my point is, you can go through all of the systems. You can go through the portals where they have the grants and the contracts. You can have the databases and the spreadsheets where they provide all the corporate contracts that are out there. You can get the full list of grants and loans and small business funding. You can have access to all of the information. You can even pay people to write a cohesive response for you. But at the end of the day, if none of those things elevate your visibility and position you correctly, you're still not going to win the grant, the contract, the corporate contract. You're still not going to be approved for the business loan, because the reality is there are billions and trillions of dollars allocated every single year. The federal government alone spends on average, y'all, $4 trillion for the exact work that you are already doing. So the question is not, is there money available? Will God provide? Should I step into this arena or not? How will they infiltrate our ministry, our business? So it's not a question of finances, of funding, of resources. The better question that you all have to begin to ask yourselves is, are we positioned to access it? I want you to ask yourself, am I properly positioned? Because one of the things I do in this coaching space, in the number of years that I've been involved with government contracting, over 25 years, towards the end of my career inside at the government, I began to have to work with organizations and businesses around cure notices. Or in other words, what cure notice is, I'm going to pause for a minute, because when we talk about positioning, cure notices are for businesses and organizations who have received government grants and contracts primarily, and as a result of the contract, there has been an issue or a problem with their performance, and the government is giving them an opportunity to remedy it or cure it. Why do these things and these nuances come up? 90% of the time is because they won the opportunity, but they were still not positioned to deliver on it. So in other words, there was a systematic or systems or process or procedure embedded within that company that did not allow them to perform well on the actual contract. So when we go back to positioning over and above being able to win and write and all the things, the question becomes, are you positioned to both keep and sustain the actual contracts and grants that you get? Understand? So let's walk through this and talk about this together. And I want you to really be honest with yourself as we go through this opportunities list. So now I'm going to talk to you about the work that you're already doing. how you're already showing up, and where this directly ties to government contracts, grants, and funding opportunities. So let's start with food pantries, because that's one of the number one areas that most ministries, community-based organizations, and outreach activities are happening around. It is food preservation, it is food distribution, it is wellness programs. So if you're actually feeding people already in your community, whether that's through food pantries, whether that's through like holidays, you're doing, a lot of times ministries and organizations will do Thanksgiving and Christmas baskets where you're providing outreach and sustenance to the community. If you do anything by way of food lunch programs, if you're providing distribution through the, what are they called? I call them food pantries and distribution, partnering with food banks. If you're doing anything around food banks, do you realize that you are already aligning with federal and state food security programs? The federal government and agencies like USDA. I'm slowing down a little bit because I want you to be taking notes all while you're watching this video around FEMA and emergency food systems assistance. Think about disaster recovery. Think about when emergency services happen. Think about when COVID hit. Think about people in the most desolate of places that require emergency food assistance. Think about community distribution. When emergency and disaster and things happen, they've got to have centralized hubs and places for people to go and show up. Do you know that when the government shut down and people lost their jobs and they weren't getting income, the food bank spiked? Food distribution spiked for churches and community-based organizations, and either you had the food to distribute or you didn't, but what also showed up in that time was your support systems. They were strained. That work that you all are doing, all of that is funded. Let's talk about these youth programs. How many of y'all, come on, raise your hand, drop a comment in the chat. You guys have youth programs. You got youth ministries. You got children's church. You got nurseries. You got children's church goes all the way from age 2, usually up to age 12. And then you've got a teen ministry, right? And then you've got a singles ministry, you got a marriage ministry, all of these ministries that are targeted to specific social groups and demographics lends itself to federal and private funding. How? Through mentorship programs, through after-school programs. Many of you have small groups that deal with leadership development. And listen, if y'all are pastor, a ministry, a leader, operating in anything in the education space, I know that you are already doing it. Matter of fact, you already got sermons that can be converted into programs, into trainings that the federal government will buy. All of this work aligns with workforce development and funding. Do you know that one of the most critical areas that are needed right now is through job training, workforce retention, right? All of that. Why? Because the government understands that they are in the process of doing a massive layoff, both internally to the government as well as corporately. So they understand that if all of these economic changes are happening, and I talk about this in my book Before the Next Break, some of the 7 critical areas that organizations need to be prepared to address. And if the government is making adjustments, don't you think we need to make adjustments in handling this as well? I think you would agree that we do. So all of this work aligns with workforce development and funding. Think about your juvenile intervention programs, your youth services grants, before and after care programs, schools, summer camps, STEM camps, science camps. Think about the marriage ministry work that you're doing, the work that you're doing with singles and counseling and therapy. All of those programs and services are funded. So I mentioned therapy, and I want to draw your attention to, if you didn't recently see, Kennedy just released over $100 million into a program and grant called Streets. It is specifically, and he called out faith-based organizations to help with substance abuse recovery and mental health addiction services. Counseling is going to be one of the number one earmarked areas in the very near future that is going to consistently receive funding and additional financial support. So whether your church, ministry, or organization is offering pastoral counseling, trauma support, marriage counseling. Mental health and behavioral health is one, again, of the most heavily funded areas right now. Think about your state contracts, your federal contracts, your community-based mental health programs. All of that work is funded, guys. And don't get me started with transportation, because many of you have transportation departments, you have transportation ministries where you have either one or two vehicles. Some of you have access to a fleet of vehicles. So if you're helping people get to their appointments, to their jobs, or to even providing transport services, there are contracts and grants that are specifically designed for transportation access, especially for underserved populations. All of that work is funded. Recovery programs. Yes, you heard me talking about addiction, but I want to highlight this because the recovery programs go much more beyond just traditional substance abuse and addiction recovery, because many of the organizations, y'all, have small groups that are focused on this. You have counseling, life coaches, actual trained therapists. You're providing services and therapy, family counseling, because there's addiction involved. That work qualifies. Reentry support. Again, many of you have a prison ministry where you are sending ministers out to the prisons to help support them. Do you know that reentry support, these are considered life restoration programs? These programs have significant funding allocated to these spaces. And so you're going to want to tap into it. So I want you to pause for just a second and ask yourself, how many of these programs are you actually running right now? Not hypothetically, not we want to, although we do help those individuals, but right now I'm talking to the people that actually are already doing this work. You're actively running them. You're actively hosting the small groups. And I want to ask you a question for a second. How many of these programs are being sustained 100% by volunteers? 100% by donations? Stretching the little bit that you have. Robbing Peter to pay Paul. Pulling from one department to cover another department. Using the same volunteers over and over again to work in specific areas. Because you feel called to it. This is the work that really gets real. Like, this is hard work. I am not discounting. I am not diluting. I am not diminishing or downplaying the work that we're doing. What my goal in this video is to show you that you're already doing it. So how do you get the government to pay you for the work that you're already doing? Because you're high impact, you're high demand, but you have low capacity systems. And it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you were never shown the proper infrastructure and system that would allow you to tap into where the money actually goes. So let me give you a reframe that's actually going to change that for you. You're not doing underfunded work. You're doing government funded work. You're just not getting paid for it. So let it sit for a second, because I know sometimes that's a harsh reality to swallow, because again, once you see it, you can never unsee it. It is not the absence of money that you're dealing with, guys. It is the absence of structure. It is the absence of infrastructure. It is the absence of systems necessary to show the government that you are both qualified and positioned correctly, because access will always be limited to those who are positioned correctly. So now it shifts from how do we get more money to how do we position ourselves for what we're already doing and align that way. You understand the difference? I'm going to say that again. It's not how do we get more money. I mean, yes, that is a question, but that's not the main question that you need to ask. The question is, what are we already doing that qualifies for the money that is already flowing? It already exists. That's a completely different question, and it requires a completely different approach. Because now you're not chasing money, you're aligning with it. And that's where most organizations are going to get stuck. It's one thing to know it. It's a different thing to actually be positioned to receive it. I opened up this video by saying some of you have awareness, you have head knowledge of what it is, but you don't actually know the behind the scenes minutia of what goes into actually being able to pursue this. And there are a few reasons why I believe that many people are not talking about it. And the fact that they're not talking about it, it has kept it out of reach for you. So in the next video, we are absolutely going to address why this is the case and why this hasn't been common knowledge. And that's what's really standing between you and access. I'll see you there.